Hi, welcome back. Good morning. Welcome to PSA, People, Stories, and Accounting, where we discuss U.S. and Israeli taxes for those living in Israel or thinking about moving to Israel. I'm Yaakov Jacob.
And I'm Philip Stein, already sort of in a pre-vacation mode with my shirt. I hope it'll get everyone else in the mood as we enter the hot month of August here in Israel.
Yeah, and we're going to be coming to you guys one last time right now, and then we're going to be taking a month hiatus to get ready for busy season holidays and enjoying that summer vacation. So thank you, Philip, for joining me again here today. We wanted to talk about a very popular question that comes up, which is when people are making Aliyah, what are they going to do with their money and how to invest it so that this way it makes the most sense for them after Aliyah. Before we dive into there, we just wanted to share one very, very nice piece, which is that we did a webinar last week for lone soldiers here in Israel, lone soldiers being those people who make Aliyah without their families and join the army, which was a very, very big honor to be able to present that with Nefesh B'Nefesh. And we have another webinar coming up with Nardis Investments. Norman Chait of Nardis Investments has asked us to come on to his podcast where we are going to be talking about more in depth retiring to Israel and paying the least amount of tax in both the US and Israel. So please feel free to tune in there and catch us live at that webinar that we're going to be doing. But Philip, I have a trivia question for you before
Okay,
we launch this. This summer, guess how many people are projected to make Aliyah according to Nefesh B'Nefesh?
it's a good trivia question. In the past, I think a good year, Nefesh B'Nefesh brings, I don't know, a couple thousand people. What do we got this year?
Yeah, they're projected to bring 2,000 people from the USA alone this summer. So it's around 115 people coming each week, which is kind of crazy. I will say that there are some cities like Beit Shemesh I am seeing boom in terms of new people coming. It is a hot summer, like you said, for multiple reasons, but there is a lot of people coming on Aliyah. So this is really geared towards them. Let's say those 2,000 people get here, they want to invest their money, you know, where should they start investing it? So,
It's actually fascinating. I mean, I actually did look something up. To date, it seems Nefesh has brought over 80,000 people. And if this is quite a number of years ago, maybe 10 years ago, we had as a client who was one of the leading demographers of American Jewish life. And I said to him, "What's the big deal? 2000, when you think the number is 5, 6 million American Jews," he said, if you carve out sort of out of that large millions of Jews that are very committed, go to day school, go to camps, send their kids to camps, um, buy kosher food, eat in kosher restaurants. He said, and this was the number wasn't anywhere close to 80,000 then, and I think not so far off. We'll hit that 100,000 mark, which will I think be very exciting for us and for Nefesh in particular. But it's a significant number of people in that specter. In other words, in terms of people that would have been paying tuition for a day school and sending their kids to American sleepover camp and shopping in kosher. It's a small number relative to 6 million, but it's a very big number. And as you say, you're seeing it in the communities you live in, a community I also live in, Hashmonaim. It's a much smaller community, but I see new people coming, and it's exciting, despite what's going on in the rest of uh, in the daily news. So let's help them. Let's give them some tips today, Yaakov, about what to do with their money when they come here.
sure. And the first question that we're going to answer is how much money should people bring to Israel? You make Aliyah, you bring your family over, and they often ask, okay, how much money should I bring with me? Do I bring it all? Do I leave some of it in the US?
Yeah,
And
it's a great question. And I think of people that I've dealt with over the years, specific people. One I remember said to me, Philip, I'll bring my family to Israel, but I'll never bring my money. Okay, in other words, he would never bring his money. Then I have people who I want to get out of the States. I think it's not the best place to keep my money, and I'm coming, and so is my money to Israel. But as you know, that latter person, certainly the former, we can give advice. The latter person, there are some things that they have to be aware of, and I think we'll talk about them today. Okay.
Yeah. And what often comes to my mind is a quote from none other than Spaceballs of all places. You know, bring only what you need to survive.
Uh-huh.
Um, no, I will say that I've seen that as a mentality that people often have. And so I will say there is, you know, the first filing requirement that we normally get to that people see is you come to Israel, you make Aliyah, you bring with you more than $10,000 that you put into bank accounts here in Israel. You know, it's not a lot of money that people are bringing. If they bring over 10,000, you might need it for rent, you might need it for tuition or other things that you have, other expenses. They will all of a sudden have an FBAR filing requirement, a foreign bank and account report form 114 filing requirement. And I've seen that people will bend over backwards and do all of these gymnastics to make sure that their account stays below that 10,000 limit. And it's
Interesting.
I
Okay.
always find it so funny because the FBAR form, while there is this filing requirement, if your accounts cross that limit, it isn't that the most difficult of forms, right? Meaning it takes you not too long to fill it out. It is something that you have to do, and you can just do it. And then instead of, I always tell people, like, don't go crazy bending over backwards and doing all of this in order to avoid filing an FBAR form. Just be aware of it and then file it at the end of the year. And we created almost 10 years ago, I think, honestly, a YouTube video of how to download it, fill it out, and send it off on your own. And then actually this weekend, Philip, I did something interesting. I actually asked AI to prepare the form for me.
Right. I
Um,
mentioned that last week. Right. Correct.
right, so last week was the tax return. This week was the
That was
FBAR
the
form.
FBAR. Huh? And how did AI do?
I would say it did just as well as any candidate we've ever had apply to a job, but it got caught on that one funny caveat, which almost every human gets caught on as well, which is when they created the form, they created it as a funny version of PDF entry online. And because of the way that they formatted it, AI can't read it. No one can read it. If you download the form and then open it immediately and without Adobe, it won't load in the web browser. Web browsers just cannot read the FBAR form. So I would say download it, fill it out. AI can absolutely help you. It prepared a duplicate of the form, but not one that you could submit with all of the right information. It could tell you exactly what to do. Be careful. You know, use an advisor if you're not sure about it, but you can definitely get a lot of information from our YouTube video and the like. It isn't a big enough deterrent to say leave your money in the US.
I want to
Right?
just address your Spaceballs reference,
Yeah.
even though I never saw the movie. I will admit that. I know it was very popular at the time. Um, I think it's today. Well, first I'll start by saying Israel is very digital in terms of money. Okay. Um, if I speak personally, I almost never have any cash on me. Okay. I either pay with my phone or my watch. Um, so that really, for that, OLED can do the same. Okay. The American credit cards will be honored here. They can probably sign up to pay their electric bills and Arnona, and all that stuff can be paid by with U.S. credit cards. I think the big items, you do have to bring money here for if you buy a car, if you certainly if you buy an apartment. But let's assuming we're talking about people who are not yet going to be buying an apartment, or maybe not initially buying a car. Probably the only thing you really need to bring the money for is rent. Okay, because that's still something that people have to write checks, and you give generally the know-how. What's the word for know-how? The way things work here is that you give like 12 checks up front to your landlord, and that's how rent gets paid here. So you really can manage with keeping your money there. This is not, I'm not making, we'll talk about a little later about investing here, but in terms of your Spaceballs reference, okay, you probably don't need to bring that much today. And cash, yes, it can be helpful, but you can manage quite well without cash these days.
Yeah, I'll also say in terms of like what you mentioned with credit cards and the like, I have a brother-in-law who leaves most of his money in the US, still uses US credit cards, and he's one of these, crazy people with the credit cards, and he gets this bonus and that bonus, and he flies all over the world for free, basically first class, and staying at all these fancy hotels and the like, specifically with all of the bonus credit card points that he gets. Israel credit cards don't seem to have that same benefit in the same way. So many people, if you're one of those, you know, point credit card people, I would say using US credit cards is definitely going to be beneficial in that regard.
Right.
So yeah,
So let's talk about, again, you bring your money for what you need. You use your American credit cards. You've got your Israeli bank account for paying your rent and maybe a few other things. But now you're thinking, well, Israel is I've heard a lot. In fact, I think for 2025, despite the war, it's the strongest stock market in the world, or one of the top five. Um, there's other options which we'll get into in terms of what you can do with your money here. But give a couple reasons, Yaakov, why you would bring, or let's start with why you would leave it in the U.S.
for sure. So we've mentioned it before on the pod, and I would tell people to go back and listen to previous episodes if they want to learn more about the 10-year holiday. But basically, when you make Aliyah, you have this 10-year exemption on any passive income that you earn outside of the US. And that will be a big play that we can dive further into. But that is one reason I would say off the bat, would be much better to leave your money and investments in the US. The second one is going to be versatility. And that is going to come into play with PFICs and the like that we can talk about more as well. But Philip, why don't you give a little bit more on the 10-year holiday?
Yeah, in 2008, and I was proud to be involved with this with Nefesh B'Nefesh, we were able to get some legislation through for new Olim, or returning residents, long term returning residents, which said that from 2007 on, that someone who comes on Aliyah, and that's what we'll be talking, we're not talking about returning residents today, long term returning residents, but for 10 years, any income they generate outside of Israel, and we talked about earned income, so we're talking today about passive income, investment income, during those 10 years is exempt from Israeli tax and exempt from Israeli reporting. So your pensions, your bank account, your brokerage account, your rental property, for 10 years, that stuff is not subject to Israeli tax. And when I say 10 years, I say 120 months. Start counting from when you
Yeah.
land. And the clock doesn't stop if you go back to the States for a few years. It's once you land, you get that Tudat Oleh, the clock is running. And for those 120 months or 10 years, you can sit back, pay your U.S. taxes, and not have to deal with Israel. However, there was a very important change that will be coming into effect. We've mentioned it in the past on several of these podcasts, is that after anyone coming to Israel after December 31st, 2025, 5 months from now, will have to report during that 10-year tax holiday. They still won't be subject to tax and all those things I mentioned, but they will have to file an Israeli tax return and say, we don't know what it's going to look like. In the past, you could just say exempt or something like that. There probably will have to give details of what you're earning, where you're earning it, which leads us to, be a little suspect of what the Israeli tax authorities' real intentions are here. And they may be asking you questions that in the past, since 2008, no one ever got asked any questions because they didn't have to answer any questions. So that's a big change. And you had mentioned before, Yaakov, something called a PFIC. Uh, and before you talk about it, and you'll even tell what the abbreviation or the Rashi Tevot stand for. This law, which may seem kind of crazy, or this type of investment, I want people to go back, especially the retirees that are listening, to the world of 1984. Okay, and in 1984, if someone wanted to invest in an offshore mutual fund, okay, they probably were doing that in order not to pay taxes, okay, and avoid taxes. And that's why Congress created this thing called PFIC. So it wasn't like it doesn't make sense. It did make sense in the 1980s. It certainly doesn't make sense in the 2025s, but we still have to live with it. So Yaakov is going to tell you all about it. Okay.
Philip, I would love to. Before I do that, can I just ask you one other follow-up
Yeah,
question that we
sure.
usually get with the 10-year holiday,
Yeah,
which is that in any case, isn't there a tax treaty in place to protect me against double taxation? So even if this 10-year holiday did not exist, I'd probably have to pay.
that's true. You wouldn't, in other words, it is, as you said, it's a U.S. Israel tax treaty for the prevention of double taxation. So you will pay somewhere. But if there's a category of income, for example, Israel charges a flat 25% on investment income. And some of, especially, I think you addressed this maybe two podcasts ago with the higher standard deduction and the special extra deductions for seniors and the special capital gains rates or unqualified dividends. A U.S. person might only be in a 10% or single digit tax bracket, and boom, if they're subject to Israeli tax, they'd have to be paying 25% across the board. This is still, I think it's quite valuable. And other types of income, like rental income, you could find yourself in a 30-40% tax
Sure.
bracket pretty quickly.
And if they bring that money to Israel and invest to an Israeli account, then it would be taxable?
Yes, yeah, that only applies to income that's generated outside of Israel. There is a little, I think, within the first 90 days or something. I have never, clients have never really availed themselves of it. That there are certain things I think you can invest in interest-bearing accounts that you could get that 10-year holiday, but it's not something that we necessarily encourage. Okay.
Okay. So let's dive into the world of PFICs then, right? So PFICs or passive foreign investment companies seem like a very distinct, rare occurrence that could come up, but we have it coming up more and more frequently every day here in Israel for U.S. citizens. And again, it is something that is specifically for U.S. citizens or U.S. residents that comes up for passive foreign investment companies or PFICs. And what basically happens is anytime that someone invests in any kind of fund, an ETF, a Karen, any kind of Karen, Kranot Ne'amanut, Kranot Sal,
What they call in the States a mutual fund.
yeah, any kind of mutual fund, hedge fund, anything that is a fund by nature generally ends up being a passive foreign investment company. And in fact, Israel also has life insurance policies that are wrapped up. Really, it's a life insurance wrapper around a investment account, which can also be problematic. And so all of those are considered passive foreign investment companies for the US. Very often they can be. They might be categorized as foreign trusts, which then could create a whole other separate issue that we're not going to go into right now. But assuming that they do qualify as PFICs, what that means is that basically there are two different negative aspects with regard to reporting and then a negative aspect with regard to taxation. And so from the reporting standpoint, I have to report anytime that I have more than 25,000 in total of PFICs. I have to report each and every single one on a separate specialized form. Or if I have more than $5,000 of any one PFIC, I have to report on a specialized form for that. And so compliance headaches, costs, accountants, everything that comes with it when you're investing in these PFICs can be really, really problematic from a compliance standpoint. From a tax perspective, you have two negative aspects. One is that when you sell it, tax aspects, instead of having long-term capital gains like you would with a non-mutual fund, of 20% income tax at the highest level for long-term capital gains in the US, you're going to be hit here with, not only are you going to be hit with the highest tax rate possible of 37% currently, it also will break it out for each year that you've had it, and there'll be interest that could be attached to it. So the negative tax ramifications are pretty, pretty high. And the second negative tax ramification that comes up is usually I sell one stock at a gain and another stock at a loss, and those two will offset each other. When it comes to PFICs, I have a gain at one, which is a PFIC gain. It's taxed to me. I have a PFIC loss. That PFIC loss is used just against other ordinary capital gains, non-PFIC gains, which means that I could be paying tax in the US when I have a gain and a loss, and in Israel they can offset each other, no tax, and I get hit with US taxes. It becomes a problem because you could be investing in the S&P 500, but because you're doing it through, let's say, a Karen here in Israel called a Harel S&P 500 fund or something like that, it can still be problematic for you. And the main reason why this happens all the time is that people invest, they think that they're investing in the US stock market, but they're doing it through an Israeli founded fund like Harel S&P 500 or something like that. And if you are investing through an Israeli founded fund, into the US stock exchange, you really have the worst of both worlds. You're still on the US stock exchange, which you could do through the US. And at the same time, it's also a PFIC because it's an Israeli founded fund. Alternatively, what very often you can do is, let's say you leave your money in the US, like we said, right? And you're
Right.
investing through your US investment account. You can invest in a global ETF, or even there's some Israeli ETFs that you can invest in, right? But you're doing that through a US founded fund. Because it's a US founded fund, it will not be considered a passive foreign investment company because it's not foreign. It's a passive US investment company. And so that will avoid all of the PFIC issues. And for that reason, I would say reason number one, 10-year exemption. Reason number two, the versatility of what you can invest in when it is through a US bank account, US investment account, is much more versatile than what you can invest in through an Israeli account.
All
And
right.
if
So let me drill down with you a little for benefit of our listeners. One, if I open a someone says to me, a client, wow, I have a brother-in-law, he has a broker here, an investment advisor, and he's been doing great. Okay. um, if I open an account where I'm actually owning Israeli stocks, Israeli bonds, and staying away from these PFICs, as you call them, or that's what they're referred to, can I do that?
sure,
Okay.
then yeah, it would not have the PFIC issue. You'd still have that 10-year exemption issue where you'd be paying Israeli taxes, but it's absolutely something that you can do.
And if I decide I still, for whatever reasons, I want to bring some money here, uh, but I can buy in my Israeli investment account a Fidelity S&P 500 that's in shekels, but they are by my broker. Is that okay?
So you can. It won't be considered a PFIC, but there's other issues that can come up. So, for example, who gets the first right of taxation? Will Israel grant you the 10-year exemption on it? It's debatable if they will, meaning very often they don't, and they will tax it. And then at the same time, if you do have dividends from such an account, Israel will likely withhold them at source. The US, won't be able to really give you a credit on your tax return as much. And so it creates confusion, but it is absolutely something that you can do.
So I want to throw one other thing into the equation. I think you've brought up obviously the tax issues, the limitation of what you can invest in. But I would say two things pro bringing your money here. One, I think that in the United States today, to get the attention of a talented investment advisor, you need a lot of money. And here in Israel, I think if you bring over the equivalent of 1 million shekel, okay, 300,000, $500,000, you can probably get to one of the top investment houses. They'll give you very good service, and I don't think you can get that type of attention in the states with 3, 5, even $1 million today. I don't think you can get in many of the really top places. So that would be one pro. And the other thing is that if you look at how I understand people coming from America, and there's no reason they shouldn't be this way. They're dollar thinkers, okay, but they are coming to a place that is a shekel economy, and if one sort of looks at their portfolio performance, but then factors in the currency, in other words, what the dollar has lost in the last 6 months, uh, 10, 12%, if they had been in shekels that whole time and made a real return, they would be way ahead of their U.S. counterparts. So I think I don't want to throw too much at people, but I think what I hope they take away from this is there's no black and white here. Okay, and again, as you said, if you bring the money here, you are going to have to pay tax. So you've got to do a bit better than you would, but it's not one dimensional, so to speak. That
I,
I don't.
I will share that when I made Aliyah many years ago, I made sure that I switched. That was one of the main things I wanted to make sure as fast as possible that I switched to a shekel mindset from a US dollar mindset. I didn't want to be converting everything into shekels in my head and back to US dollars and everything else. I think miles to kilometers, also cars kind of made that happen automatically. I will say I will guilty as charged. I still think in Fahrenheit. I cannot make the switch to
Oh,
Celsius.
okay, I have made that switch, but I'll my what is it? My vidui, my what's the word in English? I'm thinking my
Confession.
confession is that, and I'm a big walker, and I walk with my friends in the morning, and I have my watch, my Apple Watch tells me how many steps. At the end of the day, I converted to blocks in Chicago. So I walked from 71st to 95th Street today. I'm sorry, I just can't. I That's my ultimate measurement. So I'm still with blocks. And as you may not know, Yaakov, in Chicago it's 8 blocks to a mile. In New York it's 10 blocks to a mile. So the blocks are longer there. So
And you're doing it in 95 degrees of heat.
okay, I should get extra points for that. All right. So we talked about investing. We talked about, just bringing the money here. We talked about compliance. Um, what else you got to share?
Yeah, so, I
Before
mean,
we
you
close it up
mentioned it
here?
previously. I would also just say in terms of I just reiterate what you mentioned before in terms of if you are bringing the money here. So people will say, okay, well, I want to keep my money in the US. I want to invest there. I don't, but there's a giant time difference between US and Israel. And so that becomes a problem. And they might not be aware of how many people there are here in Israel that can kind of manage their money for them. Do you want to speak to that for a second, just in terms of how booming that economy is here?
Well, again, as I said before, I think you'll get a lot better attention for your money. Okay. And also, I think one of the things that I want to also address is, and I'm curious what your experience has been as of late, is that there seems to be a very arbitrary policy or policies regarding once your bank or your money manager knows that you don't live in the US. Okay, a lot of people leave their sister-in-law, their parents' address, and no one really knows. There are rules about managing U.S. citizens' monies, knowing that they're not, or talking to them. It's not
Hmm.
sort of talking to them. But we have come across people sort of letters. You must leave our bank. You must leave your brokerage. You must move your IRA accounts. Um, so sometimes people are sort of forced. They move here. They don't have an address, or people want some type of certification that they're really still living in the U.S. So have you found any good ways for people that confront this issue?
Well, yeah, I think that there are a lot of people who manage money overseas here in Israel. And I think that they can open up US accounts for you. They have connections. They know which banks can hold your money and which banks can't, and which are more friendly to people living abroad. So there is a plethora of amazing investors here who can help you. And not only that, but I think very often you find that when you have uh, guidance from or consultant advisors of people in the US, they don't understand the full picture of what it means to be living in Israel.
100%, I agree. Yeah,
And
I think that's really key what you're bringing up, Yaakov, because it, it sort of is having your cake and eat it too. You keep your money in the States, which is probably something you're more comfortable with when you first come here, certainly the first few years. But you have someone managing it who is cognizant of this economy, okay, and inflation and currency and things like that. So it's probably the best of both worlds, as they say.
yeah. Okay. So as we are winding up here, we like to give people an action item or two, right? I would say number one, check out our YouTube video about FBARs if you haven't yet. We can link it in the description, hopefully, of this YouTube video. Alternatively, if you just search P Stein, that's PSTEIN and FBAR in YouTube, you will be able to find it fairly easily. It is thousands and tens of thousands of views. It has helped people over, thousands of people file each year, and I think that it could be a very, very useful resource for people to check out. Um, and then the other action item I would say is just make the plunge already. We there are 2,000 people coming on Aliyah. If you haven't made the decision yet, if you're unsure, do it. There is plenty of place, and there's lots of ways to kind of do it safely and securely. Look into it.
And I'd like to add that those people who are listening to this, who are not new Olim, but are veteran Olim, and particularly those people who have been living in this sort of Eden, Garden of Eden, no taxes, no reporting. And one is that if they're coming close to it, relax, okay? Don't panic. You don't have to liquidate your entire portfolio before you come. You don't have to make any drastic moves, as you pointed out, Yaakov. There is a treaty, and you won't pay double tax. Maybe you'll pay a little more tax. Maybe you'll change. Maybe things, for example, you were in tax-free bonds, and now that you'll be paying Israeli tax, you might want to tell your U.S. broker or manager, listen, you put me in this municipal bond fund because I wasn't going to be paying any American tax, but now I am going to be paying tax. So maybe you want to make an adjustment. But you don't have to sell everything. Israel factors in that you've held investments during a period where they couldn't tax you. So that will be still respected. And we often find people that have portfolios where they've been holding stock a long time, or they're in some type of ETF, which you just sort of hold and have been riding the S&P 500 up. You will find that even if you've been holding a few years, if you have to pay Israeli tax, the tax that Israel might charge you, which will be usually comes out to single digits, will just take a little off your U.S. tax. So don't panic. It's really fine, and join us, Yaakov and I, as Israeli taxpayers, which our ancestors would have found to be a big scoot. So remember that.
Yeah, and I will end off with saying that I often joke with my kids anytime I tell them something. I end off with telling them to like and subscribe. But we are going to be on hiatus for a little bit now. Philip, thank you very much. Everyone who's listening, please make sure to like and subscribe and get notified when the next episode does drop. So this way you're aware.
Yeah, I think we'll see you after summer vacation. People want to share. Uh, we like to get comments. We like to get feedback. If there's something we missed, or something you'd like us to devote a session to, we're open to it. So Yaakov, thank you again, and see you soon.